My wife doesn't want me to support my younger brother's education. My name is Ethan Morales, and the moment I opened that email from my younger brother, I knew something inside me was going to break. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with a subject line that read, "Only if you can," but I had to ask. I clicked it without hesitation. My younger brother Daniel wasn't the kind of person who asked for help easily. Growing up after our parents died, it had always been just the two of us. I was 18, barely a man, and he was 10, clinging to me, like I was the last solid thing left in his world. That email brought it all rushing back. His words were polite, careful, even apologetic. "Ethan, I know you and Lana have your own life now. I'm applying to grad school in a few months and the tuition costs are steep. I've saved what I could from my part-time job, but it's not enough. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't out of options. Please don't feel obligated, but if there's any chance you could help, I'd be forever grateful." He ended it with, "I love you no matter what." I stared at the screen for a long time, my throat tightening. This wasn't some careless demand. It was Daniel, humble, sincere, still trying not to be a burden, even when he clearly needed someone. And the truth is, I'd always promised myself I'd be there when that moment came. He was the one person I'd always tried to protect, the kid who went to school hungry while I worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over us. How could I turn him away now when all he wanted was a future? But as I sat at the kitchen counter, laptop still open, I could already feel the storm building behind me. Because Lana had made her stance on my side of the family very clear over the years. "You're frowning," she said, stepping into the room with her usual poised presence, a mug of tea in hand. I minimized the email and gave her a soft smile. "Just reading something from Daniel." Her eyebrows tightened immediately, that small, almost invisible twitch that always came when his name was mentioned. "Is he okay?" "He's trying to apply to grad school," I said carefully. "He's done everything right, Lana. He's been working part-time, saving up, keeping his grades high." "And asking you for money," she interrupted flatly. I exhaled slowly. "He didn't demand anything. He just asked if I could help. That's different." She set her mug down harder than necessary. "Ethan, we talked about this. You said we were going to focus on our goals, on the house, the trip to Europe, maybe starting a family." "And we still can," I said. "This wouldn't ruin us. I've run the numbers. I could take a bit out of my personal account." "That's our money," she snapped. "Just because it's in your name doesn't mean it doesn't affect both of us." I paused, surprised at the edge in her voice. "Lana, he's my brother, and I'm your wife," she replied. "Your present and your future. He's your past, and it's time you stopped carrying him like dead weight." Her words landed like slaps. Dead weight. Daniel had spent half his teenage years eating ramen and walking to school in rain-soaked shoes because we couldn't afford better. He'd never once complained, never once blamed me for the life we'd been handed. He just kept moving forward quietly, faithfully. How could she speak about him like that? "I don't think this is about money," I said carefully. "I think it's about how you see him, or maybe how you see me when I care about him." She folded her arms. "What I see is a man who lets guilt control him, a man who lets other people's needs hijack his own. And what I see," I said slowly, "is a woman who doesn't understand what family sacrifice looks like." She stared at me cold and unreadable. "Are you saying you're going to do this?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because something inside me was cracking. Later that night, I lay in bed while she scrolled through her phone face, lit in that bluish glow that made her look so distant. I wanted to turn to her and say, "He's not just some obligation. He's my brother. He's the reason I learned how to become a man. You may not owe him anything, but I do." But I stayed silent. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. And deep down, I knew this decision, whether I helped Daniel or not, wasn't just about money. It was about what kind of man I still wanted to be. Lana didn't speak to me the next morning. Not out of spite, she wasn't one for dramatic silences, but out of something colder, something deliberate, controlled. She made her coffee, she packed her lunch, and when I reached out to grab her hand as she passed by the counter, she didn't even flinch, just walked right past. That's when I knew this wasn't a disagreement. It was a battle line. I replayed her words from the night before over and over on my drive to work. "Are you saying you're going to do this? A man who lets guilt control him? And most of all, dead weight." The phrase stuck to me like oil I couldn't wash off. At the office, I sat through meetings without hearing a thing. budget projections, new account summaries, all a blur. My thoughts were stuck in two places at once, the look on Lana's face and the words in Daniel's email. He wasn't asking for luxury. He wasn't asking to be rescued. He was just trying to move forward. And maybe that's what made this whole thing so hard, because I knew what it was like to feel like your whole future depends on someone saying yes. Lana called me during my lunch break. I made dinner reservations for Friday, she said coolly. Someplace new. Okay, I replied, cautious. And I think we need to set some real boundaries about family. Yours specifically. There it was. No emotion, no warmth, just strategy. I swallowed. Can we talk about this at home? Fine, she said. But if we're going to be partners, you can't keep doing these little charity projects behind my back. It's not sustainable. Click. That word again. Charity. Is that how she saw Daniel A. project, a weight I was carrying like some emotional pack mule? Maybe I was wrong to feel insulted. Maybe it wasn't about Daniel specifically. Maybe this was about control. About Lana trying to steer our life towards some vision she had, one that didn't include anyone I'd once called family. That night after work, I sat at the dinner table with my laptop open. Not for work, but to actually draft a reply to Daniel's email. Every time I typed, I hesitated. I want to help you, but Lana and I are figuring things out right now. Maybe in a few months. Everything sounded like a lie or a delay, and Daniel would see through it. He always did. In the end, I typed nothing. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. Then I looked around our house. The marble countertops, the custom lighting, the oversized wine rack no one used. I remembered Lana saying, "We deserve a beautiful life, Ethan, one that isn't weighed down by other people's messes." And maybe that was the first time I realized she didn't just dislike my brother. She resented him for reminding me who I used to be. Later that night, I brought it up again, gently. "Lana, can I ask something, and I want a real answer?" She looked up from her tablet. "Okay. If my parents were still alive, and they needed help, financial help, would you be this resistant?" She didn't answer immediately. That was already a bad sign. Finally, she said, "They wouldn't be in this situation. Your brother is. That says enough." My jaw tightened. "You don't know what he's been through." "And I don't care," she snapped. "Because every time you get dragged into that past of yours, you disappear. You stop thinking about us. You start trying to make up for things you didn't even cause." "It's not about guilt," I said. "It's about doing what's right." "No," she said sharply. "It's about you being unable to let go of who you were." Silence. Long, awkward, loud. And then she added something I'll never forget. "I didn't marry the older brother of a sob story. I married a man who wanted to build a future. If you're still dragging your past behind you, maybe I married the wrong person." That broke something in me. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just stood there for a long moment and looked at her, really looked. She wasn't evil. She wasn't cruel. She was just a product of a different world. One where love was conditional, where success was currency, where family only mattered if it didn't cost anything. And suddenly, I wasn't sure how much of me there was left in this marriage. The next day, I got a message from Daniel again. "Hey, just wanted to say no pressure. I hope you and Lana are good. I'll figure something out. Just hearing from you helped more than you know." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure what kind of man I was anymore. The one who did what was right, no matter the cost. Or the one who played safe and lost himself in the process. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Lana's steady breathing beside me, like background noise I could no longer tune out. My mind spun with memories not of her, not of our marriage, but of Daniel. The time he ran home nose bloodied after standing up to a bully twice his size who mocked my hand-me-down shoes. The night I brought him a fast food meal after a double shift and he acted like I'd handed him a steak dinner. The time he said, "You're not just my brother Ethan, you're my hero." That last part stung the most because heroes didn't go silent. Heroes didn't let fear of confrontation keep them from doing what was right. I thought of the person I was becoming, someone who calculated every move around what Lana would approve of. Someone who put their head down to avoid another cold conversation. Someone who valued peace over truth. I told myself it was maturity, compromise, but it was just quiet surrender. And I was starting to hate myself for it. By the next morning, I had made a decision, one that should have been simple but felt heavy with consequence. I'd give Daniel the money. Not all of it at once. Not in some grand rebellious gesture. But I'd start a quiet act of rebellion. A quiet return to myself. At work, I pulled up my savings account and initiated a transfer of $3,000 to Daniel's account, enough to cover his admissions and a portion of tuition, just a first step. In the transfer memo, I wrote, "You don't owe me anything. I believe in you." Then I shut my laptop and sat in silence. It wasn't just relief I felt, it was clarity, like a window had been opened in a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. But peace never lasts long when you're living with someone who treats control like oxygen. That evening, Lana sat across from me at the dining table, sipping white wine and scrolling through her phone. She paused suddenly, then looked up. "You made a transfer today," she said. I froze. She tapped her screen. I saw it in the banking app. "I used my personal account," I said, already on the defensive. "And we agreed long ago that there's no such thing as your money in a marriage," she replied flatly. I stared at her, then exhaled. "It's for Daniel. He needed help." I couldn't ignore it anymore. "You mean you wouldn't ignore it?" she snapped. "Because you don't respect the decisions we make together." "Decisions," I said, my voice rising. "No, Lana. You made the decision. I just followed out of fear, and that's on me." Her face darkened. "Fear of me?" "Yes," I said, steady now. "Fear of your silence, of your judgment, of becoming someone I don't recognize." She pushed back from the table, standing. "I can't believe you're making me the villain because your brother can't take care of himself." I stood too. "Don't twist this. He can take care of himself. He has for years. But when someone finally tries to rise, they need a push. And I will not be the kind of man who withholds that just to avoid upsetting you." She was quiet, breathing hard. Then she said it. "Maybe we need to rethink this marriage." The room stilled, not because it was unexpected, but because deep down, I'd already been rethinking it for months. That night, we didn't speak again. She slept in the guest room. I lay on the couch, fully clothed, staring at nothing. And yet, despite the emotional wreckage, I felt clean, like the lie between us had finally shattered. A few days later, a package arrived for me at the office. No return address, just a name, Daniel. Inside was a small wooden frame, a photo of us from years ago. I had my arm around him at his high school graduation. I looked younger, prouder. Taped to the back was a note in Daniel's handwriting. "Thanks for believing in me when it counted. No matter what happens, you'll always be my real foundation." I held the photo for a long time, and in that moment I knew, no matter what price I paid with Lana, helping him was the right choice. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. Lana and I didn't speak for 3 days. We lived in the same house, shared the same bed, but our interactions had reduced to logistics. "There's chicken in the fridge. Did you take the car for servicing?" The electricity bill came. That was it. I should have felt relieved. After all, the argument was behind us. I had finally helped my brother. But the silence that settled over the house wasn't peaceful. It was icy, heavy, and under that silence was the question that neither of us had the courage to say out loud. Was this marriage still salvageable? On the 4th day, I came home late from work. I'd stayed behind to help a colleague fix a quarterly report, mostly because I didn't want to go home. The apartment felt more like a cold museum lately, one where everything looked nice, but nothing had life. As I opened the front door, I saw Lana sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, eyes already on me. "I made dinner," she said, voice neutral. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't war either. I sat down, nodded, "Thanks." We ate quietly, grilled salmon salad, her favorite garlic mashed potatoes. She didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes. Then, out of nowhere, "You still think I'm the villain, don't you?" I paused with my fork mid-air. "I think we're standing on 2 different sides of something that should have brought us together," I replied. She looked down. "I married you because I believed in your stability, Ethan, and your ability to lead a responsible life. You always had a plan. So, helping my brother makes me irresponsible." "It makes you impulsive," she said, "and reactive. You gave away thousands of dollars based on guilt." "Not guilt," I said. "Gratitude, loyalty. I raised him, Lana. He's not just some relative. He's my family in a way that shaped who I am." She sighed. "And what about our family? The one we're building. Doesn't that come first?" That was the real question, wasn't it? Who comes first? I stood up, walked to the living room window, and looked out into the dark. The city was alive below, couples walking, horns, honking, laughter drifting up from someone's open window. "You want to talk about plans," I said softly. "Let's talk about the real reason we're stuck. We've talked about having a baby for 2 years. Every time I bring it up, you change the subject." She tensed. That's not what this is about." "It's exactly what this is about," I said, turning to face her. "We've built this curated life, matching plates, spotless floors, investment portfolios, but there's no heart in any of it. That's not fair." "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "What's not fair is pretending like our life is so fragile that helping one person, my brother, is going to destroy it." She stood now too. "You don't get to call our life heartless just because I don't want to play savior to your past." "I'm not asking you to play savior," I snapped. "I'm asking you to stand beside me when I do what feels right." We stared at each other for a long moment, and then she said something that broke whatever thread was still holding us together. "I didn't sign up to marry a man who still thinks he owes the world something." That night, I packed a small bag and left. Not permanently, not with a slammed door and a final goodbye. But I needed space, and for once, I wasn't going to apologize for needing it. I checked into a modest hotel near my office, slept deeply for the first time in weeks, and in the morning, I woke up to a text from Daniel. "Just got the official acceptance email I'm in. Couldn't have done it without you. I hope things at home aren't too bad." I stared at that message for a long time. This was supposed to feel like victory. Instead, it felt like a line had been crossed not by him, but by me. And maybe there was no going back. Later that day at work, I received an envelope at my desk. No name, just placed there by someone in admin. Inside was a printed itinerary. 2 flights to Italy, 10 nights in Florence, non-refundable, and a handwritten note on Lana's personalized stationery. "If you want a fresh start, let's take it, but not with old baggage. Think about it." My fingers trembled slightly. We had talked about this trip, our someday honeymoon, always pushed aside for practical reasons. She was trying, but on her terms. A fresh start without my brother, without my loyalty to the past, without that part of me she wished didn't exist. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I visited Daniel the next evening. He lived in a cramped shared apartment near the university. When I walked in, he was surrounded by papers and textbooks, eyes tired but excited. "Ethan?" He grinned. "Man, I still can't believe this is happening." I sat with him, watched him talk about courses, future plans, scholarship possibilities. Then he grew quiet. "Is Lana okay with all this?" I hesitated. "No," I admitted, "she isn't." He looked down. "Maybe I shouldn't have asked." "Don't," I said quickly. "Don't apologize for asking for something you earned." He smiled. I don't want to be the reason things fall apart for you." I leaned forward. "You're not the reason, Daniel. You're just the reminder." "Reminder of what?" I exhaled. "Of who I used to be, who I still want to be." When I left his place, I didn't feel heavy anymore. I felt clear. There would be a price for this clarity. I knew that. But what was the point of building a future if you had to amputate everything that made you who you are, just to fit inside it? I went home that night. Lana was in the living room folding laundry like nothing had happened. I placed the itinerary on the table in front of her. "I'm not going to Italy," I said quietly. She looked up stunned. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to start over by erasing who I am." She blinked. "So that's it?" "No," I said gently. "That's just the truth." And for once I didn't flinch when the silence returned. Because this time it wasn't avoidance. It was clarity. A week passed after I refused the trip to Italy, and Lana said almost nothing. No outbursts, no pleading, no ultimatums. Just silence, cold, sterile, practiced. We coexisted like co-workers at a failing company, sharing space, avoiding eye contact, exchanging only necessary words. It was the kind of stillness that didn't come from peace, but from exhaustion. The exhaustion of 2 people trying and failing to rewrite the core of who the other is. Some nights I'd hear her crying softly in the guest room. Other nights I'd sit on the edge of our bed and stare at the framed photo of us at our wedding. Her glowing in white lace, me with hope in my eyes I no longer recognized. And I kept asking myself the same question. When did our shared life become a negotiation of erasure? Meanwhile, Daniel had started classes. I stopped by his apartment one evening, and he answered the door with a textbook in one hand and a grin on his face. "Ethan, you won't believe this," he said, pulling me inside. "My professor offered me a research assistant position. It's small, but it covers part of my tuition next semester." I smiled. "See, I told you someone just had to believe in you first." His apartment was still a mess, clothes draped over chairs, instant noodles stacked on the counter, but it buzzed with life, purpose, the kind of mess that came from chasing something real. We sat and talked for hours, about lectures, about ideas, about life, and when I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door and said quietly, I don't know what you gave up to help me, but I promise I won't waste it. That sentence lodged itself deep in my chest, because even though I hadn't said it aloud, I was beginning to wonder if I had in fact given something up. When I got home that night, Lana was at the kitchen island, glass of wine in hand, scrolling through a travel blog on her tablet. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Your brother seems to be doing fine," she said, her tone flat. "I saw he posted something on social media, some scholarship thing." I paused. "He's working hard. He deserves the recognition." She nodded slowly, then set her glass down. "I've been thinking," she began. "Maybe we just live separately for a while. Give each other space." I leaned against the doorway. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted, voice breaking just slightly. "I just know I feel like I don't know the man I married." "That makes two of us." Her head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stepped forward. "Lana, when we got married, I thought I'd found someone who understood the parts of me I don't show the world. Someone who didn't need everything to be neat and controlled." She stared. "And I thought I married someone who wanted to build a future with me, not someone stuck rewriting his childhood." "It's not about rewriting," I said. "It's about healing." We both stood there in silence, our truth suspended between us like shards of broken glass, neither of us daring to move because we both knew the next step would draw blood. Over the next few days, Lana began packing. Not everything, just the essentials. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just moved methodically, like someone filing away the last pages of a book they had given up trying to finish. "I'll stay with my sister for a while," she said one evening, zipping her bag. "Maybe this distance will help us figure out what we really want." I nodded, maybe, but deep down I already knew. This wasn't a pause. It was the beginning of the end. After she left, the apartment felt bigger than I remembered. Quieter, but not in the way it used to be when we were fighting. This silence was gentler. It wasn't suffocating, it was honest. I could hear my own thoughts again, and I didn't feel like I had to apologize for them. A few days later, I got a call from Daniel. "Hey, can you meet me at the university cafe?" he asked. "I want to show you something." When I arrived, he was already seated, a laptop open in front of him. "Check this out," he said, turning the screen toward me. On it was a draft of a scholarship essay. The title, "What It Means to Be Given a Chance." He cleared his throat. "I wanted your feedback before I submit." I read the first few lines and my throat tightened. When I was 10, my world ended. Our parents died, and I thought my future died with them. But my brother, barely an adult himself, took my hand and said, "We're gonna make it." He didn't have much, but what he had, he gave. And years later, when I thought the dream of grad school was impossible, he believed in me again. This essay isn't about my ambition, it's about gratitude, and the kind of love that doesn't need applause to be real. I blinked quickly, trying to clear my eyes. "Daniel, this is..." I trailed off, unable to finish. He smiled. I meant every word. That night, I walked home slower than usual. Let the cold wind sting my face. Let the world move around me. Because for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, not in who I had become in this marriage, but in who I had always been, even when I tried to bury him under compromises and careful choices. Lana still hadn't called. No texts, no updates, and I didn't reach out either. Because some things once broken don't need repair, they need release. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table with coffee and opened a blank document. Subject line, "To the man I forgot how to be." And I began to write. Not to Daniel, not to Lana, but to myself. To the version of me that carried his little brother through grief. To the man who once believed that family came before pride. To the boy who grew up too fast and never stopped trying to protect what mattered most. The apartment echoed more now. Not because it was empty, most of Lana's things were still here, but because her presence, that commanding and curated energy, was gone. I hadn't realized how much of the atmosphere she occupied until it vanished. There was a stillness that wasn't sad but sobering. I started cleaning, not because the place was messy, Lana always kept it pristine, but because I needed to reclaim it. Rearranged the bookshelves, moved the couch, took down the gallery wall of our vacation dreams, and replaced it with a single frame, a photo of me and Daniel on the porch of our childhood home. It was a small act, but it felt like drawing a line in the sand. I wasn't trying to erase the life I had with Lana. I was just choosing what stayed and what didn't. One evening, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe even longer. "I saw Daniel on Facebook," she said. "He looks happy, like he's finally found his footing." I smiled. "Yeah, he's doing well. He's got a great professor, a job on campus. He's building something real. She was quiet for a moment. You had something to do with that, didn't you? I helped. I said softly. He did the rest. She sighed. Your parents would have been proud. I didn't respond right away. That kind of affirmation hit different when you hadn't heard it in years. Maybe ever. Thanks, I finally said. That means a lot. After the call, I sat on the balcony with a beer and just stared at the skyline. Not thinking, not planning, just feeling. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept with the window open and the door to our bedroom unlocked. A few days later, Lana texted me, "Can we talk coffee somewhere neutral?" I stared at the message for a long time. There was no anger in it, no passive aggression, just a request, a polite one. I agreed, but not out of obligation, out of respect, for the time we had shared, for the version of us that once felt like forever. We met at a cafe near the river. It was one of those places with too many hanging plants and overpriced lattes. We used to joke about it when we passed by. Now we were seated in it, separated by a small table and a wide canyon of silence. She arrived dressed like always, crisp, effortless, composed, but there was a softness in her face I hadn't seen in a long time. "I've been thinking a lot," she said after we ordered, "about everything, about how we got here." I nodded. Me too. She looked at me carefully. "I wasn't fair to you." The words hung in the air. "I was scared," she continued. "Scared that if we opened the door to your past, it would swallow our future." I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. "I didn't understand how deep your bond with Daniel ran," she said, "and maybe I didn't want to, because I built my life by cutting ties to the parts that hurt. I thought you had to do the same." "That's the difference between us," I said quietly. "You survive by letting go. I survive by holding on." She nodded slowly. "And neither of us is wrong, but we might be wrong together." I looked down at my coffee. It was already cooling. "So, what now?" I asked. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled through her nose, one of those slow, calculated breaths she did when she was trying not to cry. "I think we should separate. Officially." There it was. No drama, no door-slamming finale. Just truth, and I found myself agreeing, not out of bitterness, but because we had finally said everything that needed saying. The next few weeks were a quiet transition. She came by to collect more of her things. We signed papers, talked about logistics, split the bank accounts, canceled subscriptions, deleted joint calendars. There was no big fight, no flashbacks, just two people dismantling a structure they had built together and realizing that the foundation was never as solid as they thought. When she finally closed the door behind her for the last time, I stood there for a long while. Not crying, not numb, just free. Daniel came over the next weekend. He brought beer chips and a crooked grin. "So, you're single again," he said, flopping onto the couch. "Should I start setting you up on blind dates?" He smirked. "Fair." We watched a movie, played video games like we used to, and ordered terrible takeout. For a while it felt like we were teenagers again, but with rent and responsibility. Before he left, he paused at the door. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about lying, about saying yeah, just to avoid the conversation. But instead, I said I think I'm finally getting there. He clapped me on the back. "Good. 'Cause I need you around when I finish this program. Someone's got to take 1,000 graduation photos." "Deal," I said. After he left, I sat on the couch and looked around. Same apartment. Different life. There was no dramatic twist, no explosive ending. Just a man rediscovering who he was one honest decision at a time. And in that honesty I found peace. Not the kind that comes from having everything figured out, but the kind that comes from finally choosing the person in the mirror. A few weeks after Lana and I signed the separation agreement, life took on a new rhythm, slower, quieter, and surprisingly stable. I'd expected grief to haunt me, to weigh on my shoulders like a soaked coat I couldn't shrug off. But what I felt instead was clarity. No more silent wars. No more wondering if every small gesture would spark another cold front. It wasn't that I didn't miss parts of my marriage, I did. The shared routines, the predictability, even the laughter we used to have before things got tense. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to fit inside my own life. I was rebuilding from the inside out. Daniel was thriving. He'd started presenting research proposals at academic seminars and had landed a part-time job assisting his professor with a community project related to housing access for underprivileged families. He invited me to one of his presentations. Nothing fancy, he said, just a room full of sleep-deprived grad students pretending to be grown-ups. I sat in the back and watched as my little brother, The boy who used to fall asleep with comic books on his chest commanded a room with confidence, wit, and insight. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was leading. After the applause, he found me in the hallway. "You were amazing," I told him. He shrugged. "Still can't believe they let me speak." I half expected security to drag me out halfway through. I chuckled. "You deserve to be there." He grew serious. "Because of you." "No," I corrected, "because of us." Later that evening, he asked if I was really okay with everything that had happened. "You gave up a lot," he said. "Your marriage." "I didn't lose my marriage because of you," I replied. "I lost it because we stopped listening to each other long before you asked for help." He nodded but looked down, still weighed by guilt. "You know," I added, "for years I thought I had to choose between being the man Lana needed me to be and the brother you remembered me as. But maybe that was the problem all along. I kept trying to live two different truths." "And now?" he asked. I smiled. "Now I'm just living mine." Back at work I started to change too. I no longer stayed silent in meetings just to keep the peace. I voiced my thoughts, took ownership. I even volunteered for a cross-departmental project that required me to lead a small team. That old fear, the one that told me I was only good when I was small and agreeable, began to quiet. One afternoon, after a particularly good presentation, my boss stopped me in the hallway. "I've noticed a shift in you," she said. "You're more confident, focused. Keep this up." It was the kind of compliment I'd once craved from Lana. Now hearing it from someone outside my personal life, I realized something important. I didn't need validation to know I was growing. I could feel it. Around that time I also started writing again. Nothing public, just a private journal at first. Reflections, lessons, fragments of thoughts. But it felt good to put things down, to turn the chaos of the past few years into something tangible, something mine. One night, I stayed up late working on a personal essay called The Cost of a Quiet Life. I wrote about what it meant to trade authenticity for comfort, about the danger of staying agreeable to preserve appearances, and about the quiet triumph of choosing yourself after years of compromise. When I finished, I stared at the last sentence for a long time. Sometimes peace is not found in staying, but in standing up even if you end up standing alone. The next day, I submitted it anonymously to a small online publication that featured essays on personal transformation. I didn't expect a response, but a week later they emailed me back. They wanted to publish it. That email did more than validate my writing. It reminded me that my story, the messy, complicated, quietly powerful one, had value. And if I could help one person through it even anonymously, then everything I had gone through mattered in a new way. I still had hard days. Some mornings I woke up wondering if I'd made the right choices. Some nights I missed the warmth of another body beside me, even if that body had grown cold with resentment. But more often than not, I felt grounded, whole. Then one afternoon I got an unexpected call from Lana. "Hi," she said softly. "I read your article." I blinked. "You knew it was mine." "I recognized your voice," she said. "I always could when you were being honest." There was a long pause. "It was beautiful," she continued, "and painful, but honest." "Thank you," I said. "I wanted to tell you. I'm happy you're finding your voice again, even if it took losing me to do it." There was no bitterness in her words, just acceptance, maybe even peace. "Take care, Ethan," she said. "You too, Lana." We hung up. And just like that, the chapter closed not with a slam, but with a quiet exhale. I looked out the window after the call. The world outside hadn't changed. But I had, and this time I didn't need anyone else to notice, because I knew. Spring crept in slowly that year. The cherry blossoms lining the avenue near my building bloomed in small, hesitant bursts, as if nature itself was unsure whether it was safe to begin again. I felt a strange kinship with them. Starting over wasn't just about big decisions. It was a quiet process, one rooted in choice, daily, deliberate, and sometimes difficult. I had found rhythm again. Not perfection, not certainty, but rhythm. Daniel and I had fallen into a pattern of weekly dinners alternating between his tiny apartment and my now slightly less curated space. Sometimes we talked about his coursework, other times about silly things, movies, food, memories of our childhood. One night over takeout, he asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. "Do you ever regret it?" he said between bites. "Helping me, choosing me over her." It wasn't a dramatic question. He asked it gently, like someone holding a fragile object, but the weight of it still hit. I leaned back in my chair, thinking carefully. "I don't regret helping you," I said. "What I do regret is that I had to choose at all." He looked at me confused. "I wish I'd been with someone who didn't see that choice as a threat," I continued, "who saw my love for you as part of the full picture, not competition." Daniel's eyes softened. You know I'd never want to be the reason someone left you. You weren't, I said firmly. Lana and we cracked long before you ever asked me for help. You just brought the cracks into the light. The following week, something unexpected happened. My essay, the one I'd submitted anonymously, began gaining traction online. Apparently, someone influential in the personal growth space had shared it on their social media. The comments poured in stories from people who had stayed silent in their marriages, who had lost themselves in caretaking, who had chosen family over societal expectations. It struck a nerve. Suddenly, my inbox was full. Requests to write more, offers to appear on podcasts. A small publication even asked if I'd be willing to do an interview under my real name. I stared at the email for hours. Was I ready to put my face on the story? It wasn't about fame or validation. It was about ownership. Saying, yes, this was me. This was my life, and I'm not ashamed of it. So I replied, yes, let's do it. The podcast interview happened the next week. It was intimate, raw, and surprisingly freeing. I spoke about my upbringing, the responsibility I'd taken on at a young age, my marriage, the silent compromises, the slow erosion of self, and the moment I finally chose to stop apologizing for who I was. The host ended the interview with one question. If you could go back and talk to the version of yourself who was still debating whether to help your brother, what would you say to him? I paused, then said I'd say, do it, and do it without guilt, because the right people won't make you feel small for standing tall. After the interview aired, the responses multiplied. Messages from strangers thanking me for giving them courage. People who had cut off family not because they didn't care, but because their spouses demanded it. Men who felt trapped between loyalty and love, unsure which one would survive the other. And women, yes, even women who said, I wish my husband had stood up for his brother the way you did. Maybe it would have shown me who he really was sooner. I wasn't just healing myself anymore. I was helping others make sense of their own fractures. And that meant something. That weekend, Daniel came over with a grin plastered on his face. You're internet famous, he teased. Hardly, I laughed. No, seriously, someone in my ethics class quoted your essay during a discussion. They didn't even know I was your brother. That made me smile. The anonymity wasn't armor anymore. It was just context. You proud of me? I asked, half joking. He nodded, suddenly serious. I always was. I just think now, you're finally proud of you too. That caught me off guard, but he was right. For so long, I'd lived in performance trying to be who Lana needed, who society respected, who wouldn't make waves. Now I was just me, and that was enough. One night, as I walked home from a late dinner alone, I passed by a bookstore and stopped at the display window. There, featured in the center, was an anthology titled Quiet Courage Essays of Modern Resilience, and on the cover in modest print, featuring Ethan Merrick. I stared at my name for a long moment. It didn't scream. It didn't beg for attention. It just sat there, simple, steady, and true. I stepped inside, bought a copy, and took it home. I placed the book on my shelf next to the framed photo of Daniel and me, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the loudest triumphs aren't always the ones celebrated with confetti. Sometimes they're the ones whispered in quiet rooms between people who refuse to let the world shrink them. A few months had passed since Lana and I finalized our separation. Enough time that the air no longer felt heavy when I said her name or when I passed the places we used to frequent together. Enough time that my apartment no longer echoed, not because it was filled with new things, but because it was filled with me. Life had found a new rhythm. Quieter, yes, but not empty. My work had shifted too. That small essay had opened doors I never imagined, a few speaking invitations at local community centers, guest appearances in online forums, even an outreach from a nonprofit helping young adults transition out of foster care. They wanted someone who could talk about sibling guardianship and the emotional complexity of it all. I wasn't some polished motivational speaker. I didn't have a dramatic brand or a 5-point plan for success. All I had was the truth, my story. Apparently that was enough. One Saturday morning, while sorting through old documents in a storage box, I found something I hadn't seen in over a decade, a handwritten letter from my father. It was dated a few weeks before he passed. His handwriting was neat but fragile, like he was pressing too lightly on the pen. The letter was addressed to both Daniel and me, though it was clear I was the one he hoped would read between the lines. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. I'm sorry. I wanted to be there to guide you both, but life had other plans. I know what I'm asking of you isn't fair. You're still young, but Daniel will need you now. He won't say it. Boys never do, but you'll be the only compass he's got. Please be patient with him. Don't let the weight of responsibility turn into resentment. Lead with love even when it's hard. And don't forget to keep something for yourself. You're allowed to live too. Dad, I reread that letter 3 times. Lead with love even when it's hard. I thought about how many times I'd failed at that, and how many times I'd succeeded too, even when it cost me everything else. I folded the letter, gently placed it in a new envelope, and tucked it inside the book I'd published. Not as a symbol, just as a reminder that even when people leave the truth they plant in, you can stay rooted. Later that week, Daniel invited me to his first major public seminar. He was co-presenting with his professor on housing equity and policy change. I might be nervous, he admitted beforehand. These people are like real experts. You belong there, I said. You earned this. He nodded, swallowing the doubt, and stepped onto that stage like he'd been born for it. Watching him speak, articulate, passionate, fearless, I felt something shift in me, not pride. That had been there for years. It was completion. Like something we'd both been carrying for a long time had finally come full circle. When it ended, he sought me out in the crowd and pulled me into a hug. No words, just an embrace that said everything. That night, I sat on my balcony again, like I had so many nights before, and thought about the version of me who used to believe that peace only came through compromise. I thought about Lana, about how we once dreamed of traveling the world, building a life where everything was scheduled, designed, intentional, safe. Then I thought about Daniel, about the messiness, the rawness, the nights spent calculating bills and hoping rent would clear. And somehow, that life, the unpredictable one, had given me more meaning than any carefully curated plan ever could. I wasn't angry at Lana anymore. In fact, a part of me was thankful. She had held up a mirror to a version of myself that I needed to confront. And in walking away, she had cleared the path for me to return to who I truly was. The next morning, I got a call from the nonprofit again. They wanted me to keynote their annual fundraiser. Are you sure you want me? I asked. You're exactly who we want, the director said. Your story isn't just inspiring, it's real. People don't need polish, they need permission to be honest. I said yes. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I spent the next few days preparing, not with slides or data points, but with memories. I jotted down moments, small, quiet ones that carried weight. Daniel sleeping on the floor of my apartment our first winter together. The night I skipped dinner so he could eat. The sound of Lana's heels walking away after our last conversation. And the silence that followed the silence I thought would break me, but ended up remaking me. When the day of the fundraiser arrived, I stood in front of a room filled with people from all walks of life. Foster parents, former foster kids, social workers, donors. I told them about being 20 years old and suddenly responsible for a little boy who couldn't stop crying in his sleep. I told them about the years I spent chasing stability and the price I paid in forgetting who I was. And then I told them this. We all want to do the right thing, but sometimes doing the right thing costs you comfort, approval, even love. And if you're not careful, you'll start to think that means you were wrong. But standing in truth, even alone, is never a mistake. It's just the beginning. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was steady. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just telling my story. I was living it. The morning after the fundraiser, I woke up to dozens of emails, not from recruiters or talent agents or publishers, but from people, real people, strangers who had listened to my story and heard pieces of their own in it. One woman wrote, I stopped speaking to my sister years ago because my husband said she was dragging me down. I regret it every day. Thank you for making me feel less alone. A young man said, I'm raising my brother too. I'm only 22. I thought I was failing, but now, maybe I'm just trying, and that's enough. I sat on the floor of my apartment, legs crossed, scrolling, reading, rereading, and then I cried, not from sadness, from release, from the weight that had finally lifted, from knowing that maybe all those silent, thankless years had led somewhere after all. It wasn't fame, it wasn't fortune, it wasn't even forgiveness. It was meaning. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't searching for purpose. I was living in it. Daniel called that afternoon. I saw the speech he said. I mean, I was already proud, but damn. I laughed. Yeah, it got real emotional. You know what I realized, he said. You didn't talk about me like I was your burden. You talked about me like I was your choice. I paused, because you were. You always were. His voice cracked a little. Thank you for never making me feel like I ruined your life. You didn't, I said. You saved it. The months that followed felt like watching spring bloom after a long, brutal winter. I was offered a consulting role at the nonprofit that hosted the fundraiser. They didn't want me full-time, just someone to help craft mentorship programs for young adult guardians and foster siblings. I accepted, and at work, my confidence had begun to radiate beyond my title. I led teams with a new sense of clarity. I stopped apologizing for my ideas before I even voiced them. My manager asked if I'd ever considered stepping into a leadership development program. It was surreal to finally feel like the world wasn't asking me to shrink. But even in this new season of growth, life had a way of testing resolve. One Thursday evening, as I was leaving work, I ran into Lana. Not metaphorically, literally. We were both exiting a small bookstore I ducked in to browse a few self-help titles. She had a tote full of what looked like cookbooks. For a few seconds we just stood there, frozen. Then she smiled. "Hey, stranger." "Hey," I replied, my voice even. She looked different, softer, a little less sharp around the edges. Not sad, just settled. "I saw your speech online," she said. "You've really changed." "So, have you?" We stood there awkwardly, two people who had once known each other's favorite everything, now unsure what to do with their hands. "I'm glad you're doing well," she said finally. "I am," I replied, "and I hope you are too." She hesitated. "I'm trying. I started therapy. Thought maybe it was time I stopped measuring love by control." That caught me off guard. I didn't respond right away, but then I nodded. "That's good, Lana." She smiled genuinely this time. "I'm happy for you, Ethan." We parted without promises or dramatics, just a nod to the past and a quiet bow to the future. And strangely, I didn't walk away heartbroken. I walked away whole. A few weeks later, Daniel called again, this time with news. "They offered me a position in the grad program," he said. "Full scholarship. They want me to teach intro classes while I study." I grinned so hard my cheeks hurt. "Daniel, that's amazing." I didn't say yes yet. He added, "What? Why not?" He hesitated. "Because I'm thinking of moving back home, just for a bit, helping out at the local shelter. They're launching a youth housing project and I could apply some of what I've learned here." I felt a surge of pride tempered by an ache. "You don't owe anyone that," I said carefully. "Don't choose sacrifice just because you think it's what I'd do." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said, "but I also know I can't keep building a future for myself if I forget where I came from." And with those words, I realized Daniel didn't need saving anymore. He was becoming someone who could carry others too. We spent that weekend together, driving out to the small town we'd grown up in. The house had long been sold, but the streets felt familiar. We visited the tree we used to climb, the grocery store where I worked night shifts at 17, the library where we'd warm up in the winter. As we stood outside the shelter where Daniel would soon volunteer, he turned to me. "Everything I am," he said, "I owe to your choice." I put a hand on his shoulder. "No," I said, "everything you are, you chose to become." And it was true. I may have opened the door, but he walked through it step by step. That night, I started a new essay. It wasn't about sacrifice this time. It was about legacy, about the invisible ways we shape each other's lives, the quiet decisions that ripple, the way real love doesn't always look like romance or ease or agreement. Sometimes it looks like choosing someone over and over again, even when no one else understands, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted, because what you become on the other side, that's where the real story begins. I submitted the new essay on a Monday. By Thursday, it had already gone semi-viral. People were sharing it not because it was flashy, but because it felt true. There were no grand takeaways, no step-by-step roadmap, just a reflection on what it means to invest in someone else deeply sacrificially without asking for applause. I called the piece "What Love Looks Like When No One Is Watching," and people watched. The nonprofit where I'd started consulting reached out again. This time, they weren't asking me to consult. They were offering me a full-time position, director of sibling advocacy. It was a job that hadn't existed before, one they were willing to shape around my lived experience. "You'd be building programs," the director said, "mentorships, resources, legal guidance, emotional support, for people like you who raise their siblings, who sacrifice, who slip through the cracks, because no one notices the quiet heroes." I stared at the offer for a long time. I had a comfortable job now, steady pay, a routine I'd grown to trust, but this felt like calling. Still, I was hesitant. Was I really ready to uproot everything again? Start over again? So I called Daniel. "They offered me the position," I told him. "Wow," he said, "you'd be perfect for it. But I'd have to leave my current job, the stability, the health insurance, everything." "And if you don't?" he asked. I paused. "I think I'd regret it." "Then take it," he said. You once gave me everything I needed to become who I am. Maybe now it's your turn to become who you're meant to be. So, I took the job. I submitted my resignation with trembling fingers but a calm heart. And my manager, instead of pushing back, said, "I am not surprised. You were always meant for something more personal, more human." The next day, I started packing up my office. That night, I cleared a corner in my apartment for a writing desk. It felt symbolic, a space that was mine, built for creation, for purpose, for the next chapter. Weeks passed quickly. In my new role, I met countless others like me, big sisters and brothers who had stepped in when parents stepped out. People who had traded adolescence for adulthood overnight. People who had raised siblings while navigating their own losses and had done it without recognition. Some were bitter. Some were tired. But many like me had started finding their voice through writing, through advocacy, through quiet conversations in rooms that finally saw them. We launched a mentorship program in 6 cities, partnered with 2 legal aid clinics, started building a digital archive of personal stories, voices that had gone unheard for too long. And everywhere I went, I carried Daniel's story, my story, not as a script, but as proof that choosing someone else doesn't mean erasing yourself. It just means knowing who you are when it matters most. One evening, after a day full of interviews and strategy meetings, I got a voicemail from Lana. "Hey, I just wanted to say I saw the news, the position, the programs, all of it. I hope you're proud of yourself. I always knew there was more in you than you let the world see." She paused, then added, "Also, I'm engaged." My breath caught, not from heartbreak, but from the sudden sharp realization that we really were on separate paths now. Truly. She finished, "He's kind and patient. I think we both found what we needed. I hope you're happy, Ethan. I really do." I sat with the silence after her words, then smiled. Not because I'd won, but because she was right. We'd both found what we needed, just not in each other. I sent her a short reply. "I'm proud of you too. I wish you joy." No more, no less. Closure didn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it could just be clean. Daniel came over that weekend. He'd officially started his volunteer work in our hometown and was already brainstorming ways to connect the shelter with our growing advocacy network. He noticed the new desk in the corner. "You finally bought it, huh?" "Yeah," I said. Felt like it was time to stop writing on the kitchen counter like a college freshman. He laughed. "So what's next?" I looked at the screen, the blank document waiting. "A book," I said. "I think I'm ready." "Memoir." "Not quite. More like a guide, a reflection, a love letter to people who do the hard things no one sees." He nodded. "Let me know if you want me to write the foreword." I raised an eyebrow. "Only if you promise not to embarrass me." "No promises." That night, I typed the first sentence. Love is not always kind. Sometimes it's quiet, exhausting, demanding. But if you're lucky, love teaches you that giving doesn't mean losing. And when you give from your whole self, not out of guilt, but out of truth, you don't disappear. You become. I didn't know how long the book would take, or if anyone would buy it, but I knew I had to write it. Not for fame, not even for legacy. Just for the next person who finds themselves standing at the crossroads between duty and resentment, wondering if the sacrifice is worth it. I wanted them to know it could be. The first time I gave a speech as director of sibling advocacy, I didn't bring notes. I stood before a room of 60 people, half of them mentors, the other half young adults raising or supporting their siblings, and I told the story that had over time become mine in full. Not the sanitized version, not the public-facing version with polished lessons, but the truth. I told them about the fear of failing, of being enough, of choosing wrong. I told them about nights when I ate half meals so Daniel could eat full ones, about sitting on the bathroom floor holding my head in my hands while pretending to be okay in front of my brother. And I told them about love, not the kind you see in movies, but the kind you live through in sweat, sacrifice, and second guesses. The kind that changes you forever. When I finished, no one clapped at first, but they stood, not out of politeness, but because the story, my story, our story was theirs too. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in the room. I felt seen. The next morning, I got an email from a girl in Texas. She was 19 and raising her 13-year-old brother after their mom passed. She'd found my talk online and stayed up all night watching it on repeat. She wrote, "You don't know me, but your words made me feel like I wasn't broken, like I wasn't stupid for giving up college offers to keep us together. I just wanted to say thank you. You made me feel brave." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I wrote back, "You are brave, and if no one said it yet, I'm proud of you." That was all, but it felt like everything. A few weeks later, Daniel and I returned to the cemetery where our father was buried. It had been years. The grass was neatly cut, the headstone smooth from weather and time. We stood in silence for a while before Daniel finally said, "I used to think he left us too soon." "He did," I replied. "But maybe he knew we'd figure it out." I glanced at him. "I think we're still figuring it out." He nodded. "Yeah, but I'm glad we did it together. We didn't bring flowers. We brought our presents. And somehow that felt more honest." Later that night over dinner, Daniel pulled something out of his backpack. It was a photo laminated and framed of the two of us standing in front of the youth center he'd been helping renovate. They were going to hang it in the entryway with a plaque that read, "In honor of those who never give up on family." I looked at the picture. Daniel had one arm around me, the other holding a hammer sweat on his brow, a crooked smile on his face. I didn't look like a hero. I looked like a man who'd finally made peace with himself. That meant more. I finished my book a month later. It wasn't long under 200 pages, but it was whole. I called it What We Carry, Quiet Lessons from the Long Road. It wasn't just a memoir. It was a map, a guide through guilt and grief, through letting go and holding on. A reminder that just because love is hard doesn't mean it's wrong, and that choosing someone else doesn't mean losing yourself, not if you're brave enough to stay honest along the way. The publisher called the day it went to print. They wanted to know if I had any final thoughts for the dedication page. I said yes, and I sent this for Daniel, the boy who made me a man, the man who made me brave, and for every quiet sibling doing the work no one sees. You are not invisible. You are the story. The night the book launched, I stood again on that familiar balcony, same place I used to wrestle with impossible decisions. Only now, the silence didn't feel like weight. It felt like space, like room for possibility. I took a breath and whispered something into the night. Thank you. To no one. To everyone. To myself. Final reflection. People say family is blood, but that's not always true. Family is who shows up, who stays, who sacrifices and still smiles, who chooses you again and again, not because they have to, but because their heart is wired that way. I used to think loving Daniel meant losing Lana, but now I see loving Daniel meant finding myself. And sometimes the only way to become who you're meant to be is to love someone enough to risk everything. I took that risk, and I'd take it again. If you've ever felt torn between loyalty and love, if you've ever been punished for doing the right thing, know this: you are not alone. Your story matters, and someone somewhere is finding their courage through you. If you've ever had to choose between two people you love, what did you do? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Ethan's Way for more stories of truth, choice, and quiet strength.